Hello, France. Portrait Pioneers of Color. You know, there was a book published in 1930 called The Lost Tribes, a Myth, written by Professor Allen H. Godby. And in that book, there was a map, a 1930 map of Africa, of all the locations of where there had been documented of African Judaism, African Jews, Berber, Yemen Jews, Falashas in Ethiopia, Berber in North Africa, Moorish, which was Portugal, Spain, and then into North Africa, and then Negro Jews. Where were they? They were in West Africa and Central. So we take a look at this map, 1930. We have Sierra Leone, we have the Ashanti, we have Dahomey, which later became Benin. We have Nigeria. We have Cameroon. We have Gabon. But look what's over here in Central Africa. We have Dar-Nuba or Dar-Nubia, right next to Abyssinia, hundreds of miles away over those mountains. But right there in Central Africa, 1930 was this Dar-Nuba. What was this area like 350 years prior? Well, we do have the answer to that. We have a map that was made in the year 1588. It was produced by a man named Livio Seneto. He was a cosmographer in Venice, Italy, in the 1500s. He and his brother, Giulio, they had planned a massive comprehensive atlas of the maps and descriptions of the whole world, which he believed would be more accurate than any previously published. Unfortunately, Livio died in 1576, having only completed 12 maps. But guess where those 12 maps were that he completed? Yes, Africa. So these 12 maps were eventually published in 1588 by Livio's brother, Giulio. So that map in 1930 of Dar-Nubia area. Let's see what it says on this 1588 map, the year 1588, Africa Tablia. Let's scroll down to where that would be. So here we have, let's point out some of the areas here. This is written in Latin, as you can see, by the way. So here we see the Jalufa, the land of the Jalus or the Walus. We have Guinea as well. We have the Mandinga of West Africa. We recognize those on our modern maps. We have Nigeria. So we recognize that on our modern day maps. Nigeria. We have Benin, and this is in Latin, Benin's reign, or their kingdom of Benin. But now let's go over to this area that was called Dar-Nuba, right in this area here. And here we have this area, notice this, friends, written in Latin. Juderum Terra. So, what does this mean? Let's translate that. For those who are still out there who still do not believe that there could have been African Jews, there could not have been black Jews, it was impossible. They were just told this, or they were converts. They had no connection to the 12 tribes of Israel and Palestine. Friends, let's translate this. Let's go over to Google and let's translate that name. And we know it was spelled Judeo Rum in that Latin, and then terra, Terra. Look what it says. There's the Latin, there's the English. That's what this means, the land of the Jews. Man, it's deep, man. Every time I look at this, man, I get so emotional. So deep. And there it is. In the year 1588, in the 1500s. It's deep, family. It's deep, friends. It's deep. It's right there. And you know what else is so deep about this, brothers and sisters? I wrote a book a few years back called 1619, 20 Africans, talking about the history of 1619. And in that book, I have a map. And this map was of that same area. This is a map of the Congo region here, right there in Central Africa. Here's all over here would be where, as you can see on here, this would be where Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, Sierra Leone, all those areas. But then when you come down into this curve, here you're right in the same area. And look at that, Congo, Angola. And this was where many of the enslaved were taken from their villages, put on the slave ships, and were taken to Virginia in 1619, and to New York, Manhattan, New York, in 1626. This is that same area, friends. The same area that we have right here, which is translated into the land of the Jews. They came right over to Virginia, 1619, and to New York, 1626. So many, no doubt, many of these African Jews were taken captive and put on those slave ships. Man. So, friends, that's what I wanted to share with y'all today. It's very deep. It's very deep. And this is the reason why we need to find out who Messiah is. This is why we need to find out who Messiah is. Because time is getting very close and knowledge is being revealed in these last days. Knowledge is being revealed and time is running out. We need to investigate Messiah, who he is. Check out my other videos about that. And many of you already know who it is. Yeshua. There's no doubt. If you look at the evidence, look at some of my videos about it, you'll see the evidence, the secular evidence, let alone the Hebrew and biblical sources. Just looking at it from the secular sources, there's no doubt. So anyway, friends, I just wanted to share that with you. And so y'all be safe. And let's look into this more. Let's look into this more. It's right there. Hello, family. Hey, if you know anybody out there who is still not sure about black Jews in West Africa, please share this video with them. Please. Because we have some information that we want to go over with them. And so first off, let's just jump right up into this very quickly here. We got a lot of information here that we want to share with you. So first off, we have a map that was made by Alan H. Godby. This map, 1930. And it's a map here that's talking about the Yemen Jews, Falashas, Berber, Moorish, and Negro Jews, all in the continent of Africa. He has them listed here. But notice this, friends. He mentions here about the Jewish kingdom of Ghana. Let me blow this up for you. The Jewish kingdom of Ghana. Now, this was taken from a map in 1930, talking about the Jewish kingdom of Ghana by white Libyans. And when they say white Libyans, that means that they were light-skinned compared to the darker-skinned Africans in that area. But we're going to get a little bit more into this Jewish kingdom of Ghana. Let me share this with you. There's some more information that's been written about this in a book here called The Affairs of West Africa by Edmund de Morel, written in 1902. 1902, The Affairs of West Africa. Let me share some information with you. So in this book, we go over to page 130. This is chapter 16, The Fulani in West African History. It says here, the earliest mention we have of an empire existing in West Africa is contained in the Tarak, a history of the Western Sudan written in the 17th century. The empire was the Empire of Ghana, so called from its capital, Ghana, which has been identified with Walata or Beirut. The spread of the empire was enormous and extended to the Atlantic, embracing the valleys of the Senegal and the Gambia. Ghana was situate in the central province of the empire by name Bagena, the modern Bekunu, according to the Commandant Biger. The Tarak states that 22 kings had reigned in Ghana prior to the Hijra. Barth approximated the foundation of Ghana to 300 AD. It was attacked and defeated in the 8th century. This is according to the historian Leo Africanus, the writer of Cosmography and Geography of Africa that he wrote in the year 1526. Defeated by a Berber tribe, the invaders subsequently succumbing at what period is obscure to the Mandingos or Mandingo Fulani, who from its ruins constructed another empire which grew to even larger proportions, that of Meli, or Mali, as it was variously spelled. That's on page 132. It goes on to say here that Mungo Park, when writing of his experiences among the Mandingos, who appear to have been converted to Islam by the Fulani, with whom they have been in close relationship, amicable and the reverse, for many centuries, observed in a similar widespread knowledge of incidents in Old Testament history, such as the death of Abel, the lives of the patriarchs, Joseph's dream, and so on. That's on page 150. Page 149 says, in the course of his relations with the Fulani, de Goradan was particularly struck with their peculiar knowledge of Jewish history. So familiar did they speak of the chief Hebrew personalities of the Old Testament, and so well posted were they with the principal events related in it, that they could not argue de Goradon have acquired their knowledge merely through Arabic sources. They referred to those times as though dealing with their own national records. Moses and Abraham might have been individuals of the same race as themselves. In the oral legends, Moses plays a very important part, and although certain passages of the scriptures are transformed, or rather assimilated, they have so intense a biblical and Hebraic tone as to exclude all Arabic influence. It continues. De Gordion's conclusions are best given in his own words. It would seem as if the Puls, Fulani, if they themselves did not profess the Jewish faith, which I would rather be disposed to affirm than deny, were at least in permanent contact with the Jewish people in remote times, and that influenced at one time or another by the Israelites. They received Old Testament legends directly from them. That's on page 159 of the book, The Affairs of West Africa. But let's go back to the book, The Lost Tribes of Myth by Alan B. Godfrey. In his chapter here, Berber, Moorish, and Negro Jews, page 245, he says here, let me blow it up for you. He talks about the Yoruba Jews. These Yoruba Jews claim that their ancestors were driven from oasis to oasis by Muslim persecution and not finding rest even when they were reached Timbuktu. It suggests that these ancestors may have been of the Dagaratuns still scattered along the trade routes west of Timbuktu, or of the vanished Jewish kingdom of Kanuri, or of the later trading colony of Landland. At present, they number about 2,000 people in 20 little villages and call themselves by the Hebrew name Bnei Ephraim. They have copies of portions of the Torah kept in a most holy place. We could also look at the map of 1747, which also brings out Jewish colonies, Jewish tribes in West Africa. Let me blow this up for you. We also have the Kingdom of Judah here in the Dahomey region of West Africa, which later became Benin, right next to Nigeria there. So we have that to look to as well. But let's not stop here. We have more. If we go back to Alan Godby's map, 1930 map, we notice here, right next to Nigeria, a region here called Dar Nuba. Dar Nuba there. What is this referring to? Well, he mentions here on page 251 in his book that remnants of a far-traveled African Judaism are found in northern Nigeria among the Hassas and Nupis on the east side of the lower Niger, from 300 to 700 miles from the sea. The survivals are of peculiar interest because they did not reach that region from Berber, North Africa, nor through the contact of European Judaism with the West Coast. They are due to the great expansion of the Nuba or Nubian Empire in Byzantine times. As we saw in the case of Abyssinia, Christianity in Nubia was grafted upon a local Judaism centuries old. Centuries old. What did this area look like 500, 350 years ago prior? Well, look at this map in 1588, the Africa Tablia. In this map, we have the Wolof, we have the Mandingo, we have the Benin, but then look right over here, and this is written in Latin. Let's translate this. Written in Latin, there we have it. How you doing, family, fellow genealogists? I want to share with you a few more sources that I said I was going to share with you regarding this tribe in the ancient Dahomey area and the Kingdom of Judah. So let me share that with you here. So this other source is, as you can see, it's written in French. It was published in 1890 by the University of Montpellier in France. So let me pull that up on the internet to show you. Okay, here we go right here. So let's do a little search inside. We'll just put in the word Judah, since that is the name of that village there. And we go over to page 272. This is in volume 13 as well of this publication. Okay, and here we have it. As you can see, it's all written in French, but we have a translation of what it's saying here. And as we already mentioned about the that the name of the village was known by different names. They called it Wida, Fida, Haida, Judah, and Judah. But basically what the translation is saying here, it says, Judah is an old city frequented since the 16th century by the Portuguese slavers, who gave it its name. Its inhabitants were said to be Judaic, and they were indeed considered to be a remnant of the scattered tribes of Israel. So again, its inhabitants were said to be Judaic, and they were indeed considered as a remnant of the lost tribes of Israel. Let me show you another source. And as I'm showing this other source to you, I want to bring out to you, there also is another group that has been reported that they are also claiming to be descendants of the Israelites in Cameroon. They are in West Africa, and this is called the Bani Israel. And basically they trace their lineage back to, they say, to the Egyptian Jews. They say that their people came from Egypt to Somalia, and then from Somalia to Nigeria. And then about 1,000 years ago, they split into two branches. One went to Mali, and the other went to Guinea. So that's the Bani Israel. So we see that there's various groups that are having this common theme, that they have a oral tradition that their ancestors go back to the ancient Israelites. Is that just a coincidence? All these groups that are saying this? I don't think so. Well, let me share you this other source with you, friends. Okay, this other source is called The Lost Tribes of Myth by Alan H. Godby, written in 1930. The Lost Tribes of Myth by Alan H. Godfrey. So let's pull this up on the archives.org. Okay, there we have it there. And let's read a few of the quotes from here. Okay, well, here we are on page 244 of this publication, and it mentions here that there was a distinct Jewish community that survives in northern Guinea. There's a large Jewish community. It goes on to say that they found the Pentateuch written on parchment in Hebrew letters, but they have no other books. Now, this was written in 1930. Okay, on page 245, goes on to say that 400 families claim Semitic ancestry, and they may not intermarry with fetishists, but may with Muslim families because they are monotheists. It goes on to mention here too that they're called Yoruba Jews. These Yoruba Jews claim that their ancestors were driven from oasis to oasis by Muslim persecution, not finding rest even when they reached Timbuktu. Okay, so that makes sense. So, according to their story, they were fleeing persecution because they were a minority. They were claiming that they were Jewish. And so they went down into Mali, where Timbuktu is, and then from there they came into the Nigeria area there. It says at present they number about 2,000 people in 20 little villages, and they call themselves by the Hebrew name Bani Ephraim. Interesting. And they have copies of portions of the Torah kept in a most holy place, but their social life is not Torah controlled. It is that of their fetish neighbors. So basically what they're saying there is that they, even though they're trying to keep their faith or their worship of Jewish beliefs, it's probably been mixed up with the other pagan religions that were surrounding them in the environment that they were living in for all those years, and some had to do that just to survive. So, but isn't that interesting there that they said that they had copies of the portions of the Torah kept in a most holy place. Okay, now let me share this other thought with you. So on the next page, page 246, I found this very interesting. The writer of this publication, Alan Godfrey, he makes the connection, as we showed you, he was talking about these various groups in Africa, but then he makes the connection about the presence of Judaism among American Negroes. Very interesting. Notice what he says here. He says, these facts have a peculiar significance when the presence of Judaism among American Negroes is to be considered. Hundreds of thousands of slaves were brought to America from the Western Africa during the days of the traffic, beginning nearly 400 years ago. How much more of Judaism survived amongst West African Negroes in that earlier time? Isn't that interesting that he brings that question up? And then he goes on to make an interesting thought too, I thought. He says, how many of them might still hold some Jewish customs in their new home is another question. He also says it may be considered certain that many partially Judaized Negroes were among the slaves brought to America. You see that? It may be considered certain that many partially Judaized Negroes were among the slaves brought to America. Okay, friends, I wanted to share these sources with you today. So much going on in regards to this story. We'll keep sharing more information about this story with you. Until next time, friends, stay safe. And we'll share an interesting topic with you next time on this, especially about the. So here's this map, and it's called Negro Land, which is very interesting. Negro Land. So let's see what this geographer said about this particular village or kingdom in ancient Benin or Dahomey. East of Great Popo begins the Dahomey territory, guarded by the important town of Liwe, known to Europeans by the various names of Fida, Heveda, Waida. Notice this, though, friends. The old writers called it Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be Jews, while the neighboring river Alala, whose real name is Ephra, became the Euphrates. But then notice this. During the flourishing days of the slave trade, from 16 to 18,000 were annually transported from Judah, as the Portuguese called this place. Did you get that, friends? Annually transported from Judah, as the Portuguese called this place. So, friends, Judah or Judah was not a word that came from the African languages. This was a word that the Portuguese gave this village when they first arrived in the 1500s. And the reason why they gave this village this name Judah was because they noticed that the tribes were practicing Judaic customs. Did you get me on that? The Portuguese called it because they were noticing that this African village in Benin or Dahomey were practicing Judaic customs that were normally, in their eyes, were what the Jewish people practice in Israel. So the Portuguese gave it that name, Judah, based upon the tribe of Judah in Israel, Palestine. There's another couple of other books and other sources that I want to share with you later, friends, that also talk about this as well. There's one book that's in French. It was published in 1890, and then there was another one that was published, I think, in 1906, and they also give a little bit more information. So we'll get this out to you, friends. So until next time, y'all stay safe. So we're going to look into this a little bit more closely about this kingdom of Judah that's mentioned here on the slave coast. This was taken from a map in 1747. And this is the map here. And if you make a screenshot of it, focus in on it, it's talking about the kingdom of Judah there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But before I do, I want to say that we do have a example of a African who was brought over, enslaved, and brought over to America. And this is the narrative of the life of Olaudah Equineo. He wrote this himself. Olaudah Equineo, he was kidnapped from a village called Isaka Ibo in Benin, but now it's in present-day Nigeria. He was kidnapped in 1756 when he was 11 years old. Him and his sister were kidnapped, and they were enslaved and brought to Barbados. And then for Barbados, he was sold to Virginia. And in his village, in his Igbo village, he mentions in his autobiography that he wrote himself that his Igbo tribe practiced the same customs of the Jews from the Torah. So we have an example there of this individual brought over enslaved to America, and he claimed that he was a descendant of the Jewish people. But now let's get more into this map here that we are talking about. Now the Jewish Igbo today, not everyone of the Igbo tribe claiming Jewish ancestry, of course, but the Jewish Igbo, they have various versions of a migration story that they say involving Jacob, who was the grandson of Abraham. Now, Jacob, we know, had 12 sons. They say that they descend from one of Jacob's sons. They say his name was Gad, and that Gad had 3 sons named Eri, Arodi, and Areli. Now that's very interesting because Jacob did have a son named Gad. And Gad had 7 sons. His 5th, his 6th, and his 7th son, guess what their names were? Yes, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. So there's something there, and that's what they claim. This is an oral story that's been passed down thousands of years to the Jewish Igbo, that they have a migration story that they were descendants of Jacob through his son Gad. Now let's talk a little bit more. Now let's get online again here and look up some information. Now this I had told you about in the previous video that I put out about this particular part of the Midrash, which is part of the Jewish literature. We talked about that in the previous video here. This was a compilation from the Piki de Rabbi Eliezer, which means these are the chapters of the Rabbi Eliezer. His name was Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, or Hyrcanus. He was a prominent teacher in the 1st and 2nd century CE in Palestine, Judea, and he did an interpretation and elaboration on the biblical text, and this was about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. And so we went into this last time, but just for those that may not have caught that, you could go back and watch that video. I hope you do. But basically, he was talking about Noah and his sons and his grandsons, and he blessed them with their several settlements, and he gave them an inheritance of the earth. He especially blessed Shem and his son. We know that Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And he says he blessed Shem and his sons, making them dark, but comely. And we know that the Hebrew word for dark or black is shakor, and comely. So basically that means he was beautiful, black and beautiful. and he gave them the inhabitable earth. He blessed Ham and his sons, making them dark, Shakor, black, like the raven. So he was jet black. Remember, we talked about that in the previous video. And he gave them an inheritance, the coast of the sea. And then he blessed Japheth and his sons, making them entirely white. And he gave them for an inheritance the desert and its fields. These are the inheritances with which he endowed them. So we talked about that in the last video. And Eliezer ben Hukanas, as I mentioned before, he was a prominent sage or teacher. He is the sixth most frequently mentioned sage in the Mishnah. And of course, the Mishnah is a multiplicity of legal opinions in the oral tradition. The Talmud is the generations of rabbinic debate about law, ethics, and the Bible, structured in a commentary, and stories are interwoven in the Mishnah. But this is from the Midrash, which are interpretations and elaborations upon the biblical texts. And it went on to say that if you could Google him up, Wikipedia has a page about him, that in later years of his life, he was quoted as saying that he never taught, he says, "I have never taught anything which I had not learned from my masters." So very interesting that they would have this in their Jewish literature. This is read to this day in their synagogues, in their congregations. It's very, very interesting. And so, yeah, we have it right here. Why would they have this, or why would they, you would think that if they were trying to hide something, that they would be the other way around. But here it is right here in black and white, friends, that he was dark, Shakor, black, Ham was like the raven, and Shem was dark, Shakor, but comely, beautiful. All right, but let's get back to the map that we are talking about here. If you go to the Wikipedia, you could type in, there's another book here that I want to show you that's going to get more into this, about this kingdom of Judah that was mentioned on that map in the Nigeria, Benin area. In this book here, it's called The Earth and Its Inhabitants, the Universal Geography, Northeast Africa. This says volume 10, but we want to go to volume 3, published in 1888. I'll show that to you in a minute on the internet. But this was written by Elise Reclus. He's not the one who did the map. That was done by Emmanuel Bowen. But this individual here, Elise Reclus, he was a French geographer. And so let's get into that. So if we pull him up on Google and pull him up on the Wikipedia down here, and we have Elise Reclus. He was a French geographer and a writer. And if we go down, scroll down to where we have his books, he wrote many books and brochures, anthologies, articles that he wrote. But go up to his books here, and you notice we'll find the one that I was showing you, The Earth and Its Inhabitants. And he had different volumes on Europe, North America, and Africa. So if we go to the one on Africa, click on volume 3, and I'm going to show you. And there we go. This is volume 3 of The Earth and Its Inhabitants, volume 3 of Africa, published in 1888. And if we go over to page 267, and actually I have it over here, so let's just go right here, page 267. You can see that right at the top there. But keep in mind, the digital version, the page number is different. The digital page number is page 330, but the page in the book was page 267. So anyway, this is on, he's going to be talking here about the country Dahomey, which we know today is the country of Benin, right next to Nigeria. So let's talk about this map. He makes mention of this map here, and not of the map, but he makes mention of this kingdom of Judah. Some people have questioned that, say, well, that has nothing to do with the Jewish people. That is a word that was probably in their African language and doesn't have